Good morning, this is Thomas from thomasyoungauthor.com, and it's early morning, but today I want to give you an overview of my 10-part essay collection. Okay, I already published 4 essays in my collection called Deconstructing Pride, and Deconstructing Pride is basically about challenging, not so much homosexuality, but the identity attached to it, the gay identity, and why I think it is a bad idea for homosexuals to adopt that identity and to believe in that identity and to start sort of disentangle homosexuality from that identity, because it is a bad identity. It is an identity basically centered around sex, that says you have to put sex at the center of your life. That's what being a homosexual is about. And if you've watched my other videos, my morning updates, you'll know that what I think about, what is now commonly referred to as the gay community, which sort of originally was and still is a criminal world, and that is something that is overlooked, because a lot of people, even though they don't participate in it, they find it alluring, they're sympathetic to it. But I think that got a little bit out of control, and I think that is also one of the reasons why I started writing about these things. See, because and it's not that I used to be identified as a homosexual or as gay, and then now I no longer do. No, I was always a homosexual, but I always had issues with that identity. See, so I'm a homosexual, but I don't identify as gay. But then you would say, yeah, well, but you have these very sort of gay characteristics. Yes, I do. But these are personality traits I acquired, and they are somehow have to do with my homosexuality. But one should not confuse that with the gay identity that is now rammed through people's throats, in schools, in the media, everywhere. Every homosexual teenager has to make sure, has to adopt, the gay identity. And I think that is wrong. I think one should, continue to see these things as, as separate things. I think there is some value in that, and I think there is, some value in that. It's important that one keeps that distinction. And I'm also not one of the people that says, well, homosexuality is not real. There is only something called same-sex attraction, and that's it. And these same-sex attractions are immoral, and therefore one should do everything one can to resist that. I'm also not of that school, because homosexuality is a real thing, and I consider myself to be a homosexual. Although I'm the kind of homosexual who always missed having a woman in his life. Actually, a homosexual actually needs a wife, because I'm not very good at taking care of myself, and I need an influence, and I miss that influence in my life, even though I am a homosexual. The first essay I published was called Homosexuals and Gays, and in that essay I laid out how I think I'm explaining the distinction between same-sex attraction on the one hand and homosexuality on the other hand. Same-sex attraction can be, situational, or an intermittent thing, or it's sort of a phase, as one used to call. That can be true. But a homosexual is basically someone who is, persistently and very strongly, almost exclusively attracted to people of the same sex. And then, of course, you have to distinguish between, same-sex attraction and homosexuality and the gay identity. in that essay, I'm also explaining what keeps that identity basically together, what holds it together, and that is, these are certain victimhood narratives. Sort of homosexuals, are the victims in the society we live in. They suffer from something called homophobia. Now, I live in a country where homophobia is I wouldn't say not present, but it's no longer really there. I mean, you can live here freely as a homosexual. There will be not a lot of problems. But even though that's the case, people cannot stop talking about homophobia. And when you ask them what kind of homophobia you encounter, you never get a clear answer. I mean, I've lived in Amsterdam for quite some time, and for years, when I asked people what kind of homophobia do you encounter, there was always one story going around, and that was, yeah, that one time, a drag queen was denied a taxi. That was the only thing they got, and people told me this. Different people told me this story for years. That was the only thing they had. They have a feeling that homophobia is on the rise again, and a lot of these, especially right-wing gays, say that's because of the Muslims that live here, but I highly doubt that. That is not the case, and I will also argue that what these people mean, things are getting worse. I mean, things are getting worse, but not because of homophobia, but because of dynamics in the gay world itself, and about the sort of the gay world is basically a manosphere. There's a lot of talk here in this country about the manosphere and how bad it is and how evil these people are and how misogynistic these men are. The gay world is just as misogynistic as the manosphere. They hate women as much as but you see, gays have the reputation of being nice to women, which they are not. You see, I mean, when you see lesbians, and we're talking about lesbians, have no problem usually with having the reputation of hating men. And I mean, why else be a lesbian if you don't hate men? I mean, I find it really funny that homosexuals always claim that they are not misogynistic. Yeah, but then what are you doing here? I mean, that is really weird. But a lot of the gay identity and the gay culture, there's a lot of good marketing around that. You see it in the slogans and the rainbow flag. I mean, there is a lot of sort of marketing tricks going on, sort of brainwashing tactics and strategies that are being used. Now, I was talking about victimhood, and then I think the central event in a gay person's life, in a person who says I'm gay, and he uses also gay as an adjective before many others. So when they're lonely, they say I suffer from gay loneliness. When I'm not a man but a gay man, and I'm not a doctor but a gay doctor, and stuff. Everything about them becomes gay. I mean, their sexuality becomes sort of the central part of their life, and everything they do, every good thing or bad thing that happens is somehow linked to their gay identity or their homosexuality. And the main event in such a person's life is what they call the coming out of the closet, which is basically sort of secularized confession ritual, which has to be done over and over. And these stories are always told in the same fashion. So every homosexual teenager goes through a phase where he feels like, what would people think of me if I, I feel bad and this and that, and I'm not sure. But as I explain, that is not my experience and my personal experience, but not that of the people I was friends with. We were very relaxed about our homosexuality. We also never had a coming out as these people. And just look at their stories, and and then you'll see. I mean, victimhood. It is in our culture now. It has become fashionable to indulge in victimhood, because that's what it does. I mean, I don't think having problems with your sexuality is something you should brag about. You know, I don't know, because these people, and that's also why the identity is so, why people love to adopt that identity, because it basically tells them, oh no, you were not a coward, you were not, you were not bigoted, you were not narrow-minded. No, it was the society or the church that made you that way. And if you adopt that gay identity, you overcome, you know, that horrible society that made you into a little bigot. Now, I find that laughable, and it's also not true. You know, they never say, okay, maybe I was a coward, maybe I was a little narrow-minded, I had a narrow-minded view of my own sexuality. You never hear that. It's always this victimhood narrative. Okay, and in the same essay, Homosexuals and Gays, I talk about also how where this homosexual life comes, where the gay identity comes from, out of sort of this niche world of organized crime and prostitution that offered people what you would call a double life. It used to offer them. And what the gay liberation movement basically does is wants to get, you know, or presents itself as if it wants to push or wants to get, you know, homosexuality and the gay identity out of the gay culture, out of that niche world of crime and prostitution. But as you have seen in my videos, no, it is still that dark world of crime and prostitution. But now they can hide behind the pride flag. A lot of criminality goes on behind that pride flag. And it's not just, you know, about the usual stuff, drugs and human trafficking, because that's what lots of goes. But there's also a lot of, you know, sexual grooming going on and, you know, really immoral behavior. The second essay I published was on professional gays, you know, and you know, I talk about it, and I'm using a lot of evidence here from interviews, and I'm presenting you with a lot of quotes. And one of the things I argue is what I find strange about these professional gays: they all think alike and they all talk alike. You know, it's not that they have that there is a variety of professional gays who think differently about these things. And although, you know, in the central person I'm discussing in this essay is Dan Savage, and he's I think the king under professional gays, and he is also well aware of the things I criticize, and that was one of the reasons I chose him, because he knows, and because in every interview, you just watch his interview, he says, oh, I'm just a voice among many. And then I said, no, you're not. You basically all say the same things, and then you argue about you know, little silly things. But the ideological construct, which is basically a substitute religion, that's what gay culture and gay identity provides. That's all the same. And I also argue in that article, but what are they there for? Because these people they often call themselves activists, but are they activists? Is it activism if you have no resistance, if there's no resistance against what you say? Because, you know, everybody listens to you, everybody you know, wants to be accommodating to you anyway. How is that activism? I'm gonna explain what role gays in general, but also professional gays, play in sort of a liberal society and how it is organized. Okay. Then the third essay I published was, I think it was called The Sentimental Exhibitionist, and it's called Gay Culture on Social Media. There, I'm going to talk about the influencer phenomenon and what the influencer is. Because an influencer is basically someone who's selling you products, but he's selling you much more. It is not like like in old advertising, where they sell you cookies or coffee, and then, you know, he doesn't really drink the coffee or he doesn't drink the cookies. No, these people, to a certain extent, really are authentic in the sense that they really use the products they sell, or they really do, you know, like with OnlyFans. And with the gays, you see that in OnlyFans. They sell you their self-made pornography, and there is some authenticity in that, but they sell you on much more. They sell you also on the gay identity. And, you know, and part of the gay identity has always, for example, been you know, a certain romanticization of sex and promiscuous sex, but also of prostitution. And, you know, and I encounter a lot of gay guys, and what they're basically saying is, you know, displaying yourself in this pornographic way is a healthy thing. It makes you feel good about your body, you know, if people pay for you and so. It's the same rationale they use for prostitution. You know, prostitution is this wonderful thing. You can make a lot of money, and you know, it's good for you. It will make you feel good about yourself. And this is how they lure people into prostitution, and it works the same for OnlyFans. And in that article, I'm also going to talk about guys my age, and you can see them online, and they struggle with their gay identity, you can say, because, you know, the gay identity for many gay people is a prison. Because you see, homosexuality is a lot of fun when you are young. You know, you can have a great sex life. You meet interesting people. You know, that is an adventurous lifestyle to a certain extent also. But when you get older, you know, so it loses that, because it's no longer fun, and it's, you know, you've seen it all, and there's nothing fun about it. And everybody who knows the gay world knows what then happens. They start grooming other people. They get malicious. They get cynical. You know, the aging homosexual is a huge problem in this in the culture we live in. I mean, I've seen many people die around me. You know, because basically they even said it to my face. I mean, why do I need to live? I mean, they basically agree with me. You know, homosexuality is fun when you're young, but when you get older, it loses that, and they saw no reason to live, and you know, that kind of stuff. And that's a problem a lot of homosexuals have. And in the essay, The Sentimental Exhibitionist, you know, I'm describing, you know, some guys who have this sort of online group, and they call themselves the Gay Brotherhood, and they try to enrich, you know, sort of their idea of the gay identity with sort of these spiritualized ideas. And I'm showing you that is really absurd, how absurd that is, and how crazy that is, because they still, you know, like the OnlyFans model, they put sex at the center of their lives, only they don't have it now as much. But at least if they don't have it, they want to talk about it endlessly. You know, I talk about that in that essay. And the last essay is called Paradise Lost, and the subtitle is Gay Culture and the Promise of Sexual Liberation. And, you know, and there I'm explaining to you how gay culture has changed over the past 30 years. Because I remember a time when you could actually live a promiscuous lifestyle freely and without much problems, and without people having constantly watching over you, to a system of rank and hierarchy and control, because that's what it's now. I mean, it has become almost impossible to live that lifestyle anymore, unless you're willing to do stuff for it, unless you are willing, I don't know, to engage in certain, I guess, criminal activity, condone human trafficking, that kind of stuff. You have to compromise yourself in order to live such a lifestyle. And I'm going to talk about that. I talked about that in that essay. And, you know, so there was a time when being homosexual was more fun than it is now. It is no longer fun. In that essay, I'm going to talk what role dating apps played, because I remember a time when you had to, you know, actually go out to meet people. You know, you couldn't. There were no dating apps. There was internet. You had chat websites, and there I met also a lot of people. So I saw sort of this. When I was young, these two things existed alongside each other. And I've seen one side of that, you know, the nightlife side of that, basically disappear completely. And that is, and that world is greatly missed, because when I talk to homosexuals who are older than I am, they tell me the same thing. They know what I'm talking about, and they tell me these things too. You know, they are often very lonely. They don't know where to go. They have no friends. You know, it is really sad to see. And of course, the question is, you know, did sexual liberation, you know, did it deliver on its promise? And I think you know the answer to that. And you see, because, you know, gays also present themselves often as if they have these great sex lives and if they constantly have sex and everything, which is true to a certain extent, but also not. Because I'm also describing a type of person. You see, in a world as promiscuous as the gay world, it's not that most people enjoy sex. A lot of people are unable to enjoy sex, either because they're psychopathic or highly narcissistic, or they have other issues. But you always have to keep that in mind when you're in a promiscuous world. A lot of people don't enjoy sex. They use sex as a way to, you know, sort of exert their power, or even more sinister reasons. And I think people should be aware of that. In that essay, I'm also talk about the lunacy of pride parades, and and also the problem that a lot of people are talking about, not only gays, but, you know, I cannot enjoy sex, I don't have sex anymore, I don't know. Yes, and it has to do with exhibitionism in speech and display. If you constantly talk about sex, if you are constantly confronted with sexual imagery, if you know, if sex is, you lose the ability to enjoy sex. And that's also one of the main arguments I'm going to make. So these were the essays I already published. My next essay will be called Tolerance, Acceptance, Glorification. And in that essay, you see, I will also trace, you know, the shift from sort of tolerance of homosexuality, which must have always existed. I mean, there must always have been some forms of tolerance. You know, that is not new. And I'm also going to argue why tolerance is a good thing, you know, and not a bad thing. You know, I don't think you can root out. I mean, homosexuality is an enduring pattern of human behavior. It's not something that goes away. It will always be there. I mean, but that went from a phase of, let's say, acceptance, which was here in the 1990s, made it an acceptable lifestyle, even a really respectable lifestyle, and said, okay, these people have to be treated equally, they should have access to marriage, also for legal reasons, of course. I mean, they have, you know, property and stuff like that. I mean, there were some good arguments for that, but now, you know, gay people want to constantly be affirmed and glorified, and I'm gonna explore what is behind that and why it is a bad thing. You see, because I will call one of the chapters, I think it will call the moral style of decadence, because it is the glorification of homosexuality says something about a decadent society. You see, because acceptance of homosexuality basically grew out of greater material wealth. That made that an acceptable and an acceptable lifestyle, and that also led to all the, you know, the equal rights stuff, in instance. That I don't think that if material conditions hadn't changed, homosexuality would still not be accepted, at least not. But you see, glorification is of a different order, and it also challenges the emancipation narrative, because the gays try to convince you that homosexuality or the emancipation is something that is ever progressing. That is not true, and that is also not necessary. It is nonsense. And after that, I'm going to devote an entire essay on, I think I'm going to call it the myth of internalized homophobia, how to enforce the gay identity. And in in that essay, you see, I'm going to talk about the concept of internalized homophobia, because homophobia and internalized homophobia are the ways to coerce people into adopting the gay identity. Because if you don't adopt the gay identity, that means you're a homophobe, even if you're a homosexual. If you even dare to criticize the professional gays and what they say and all the things and all the fucked up things they believe in, you suffer from internalized homophobia. Now, internalized homophobia is a real thing, and I talked about it also and discussed it in my gang stalking videos. I mean, internalized homophobia can be really dangerous. These are people who suffer from that are dangerous people. But what they managed to do is, what the people who think they're important in the gay world have done, is they convinced everybody that every criticism, every problem, even if you say, I reject certain parts of that gay identity, I don't want to put sex at the center of my life, I don't think it's a good thing to go on a gay cruise or something, that is also internalized homophobia. And I'm going to explain how evil that is. Because, you see, for years, if a homosexual person got in trouble, for example, for substance abuse issues, what they were being told by doctors, by psychiatrists, is you have a problem with substances because you're a homophobe. I mean, I'm not making this up. This was what went on. You know, sort of, and I'm also going to talk about because treatment centers and drug treatment centers, I mean, they let, you know, homosexuals who were basically junkies and never gave up their drug habit, which usually is methamphetamine, and then they let these people advise the professionals, the mental health professionals, on these subjects, and they were the ones who convinced them that if a homosexual gets into trouble with drugs, or he has substance abuse, that's because he's a homophobe. And these people were taken seriously, and I'm going to write about that in that essay. I think another essay I'm going to call something called Nature, Nurture, Other Nonsense. And it's about that endless debate about what causes homosexuality. Is it innate? Are you born that way, or is it a developmental thing? And I think that discussion is highly misleading. Because first of all, what does it matter? And second of all, I mean, the so-called scientific research of this is all flimsy. There is no serious scientific research on this, or with any serious or say significant findings. This is all people don't really know. But it's also misleading, because you see, let's assume, because what is the purpose of that debate? What they want to achieve by having that debate is basically saying there is no morality involved when it comes to homosexuality. You know, homosexuality needs to be detached completely from morality. And I think, you know, and if you've seen my videos, I think that is wrong. There are moral questions involved when it comes to homosexuality. And what that debate does, it says, well, no, homosexuality has nothing at all to do with morality. Okay. And then I'm going to devote an essay to two essays. One I will call On the Queer Expansion, and the other one will be about Judith Butler. And it's about the wider, you know, LGBTQ umbrella, about, you know, the term queer that has come into fashion, which is basically the gay identity, but then for more people. And then on the one hand, you have this sort of ideology centered around gender non-conforming people, and on the other hand, you have these gay guys who basically say, yeah, we don't want these people, we don't want to have anything to do with these gender non-conforming people. We had this wonderful gay identity and now they are ruining it. They're ruining the pride flag, they're ruining gay pride parades and stuff like that. I don't believe that that is true. The craziness was already there with the gay identity. Okay, it is not, the gay identity was not better than, you know, the LGBTQ stuff. It is both as equally bad. But you see, but there's also things I like about these gender non-conforming people and what they stand for, and okay, I will write about that. And then I want to devote an entire essay on Judith Butler. Judith Butler is a pop star. She's a Berkeley professor, Judith Butler, and she became this sort of pop star. She thinks of herself as this new Michel Foucault and stuff like that. And she, you know, she in the 80s she wrote that groundbreaking book, was called Gender Trouble. But lately I've been watching some interviews with her, and what she does basically is only talk nonsense. There's nothing coming out of her mouth that makes any sense. They talk about the manosphere, all that, you know, all that stuff that is now popular, and I cannot even follow her reasoning. And then, you know, she is stuck. I mean, you know, I'm not an expert on this, but what I've read about, you know, what's behind gender theory, I mean, it is flimsy in the end. It is not, and it's presented as science because there are a lot of professor gender studies and this and that, but you see, it is very flimsy. I'm not saying, you know, the gender issue is not an interesting issue, it is, but it's an issue that doesn't lend itself to become popularized, because it stands on shaky grounds. So whenever ideas from that get popularized, I mean, they immediately get vulgar and strange and everything else, and this is what we're witnessing now, and that's also what's also driving the craziness around the pride parades, but also people wanting to adopt that identity. And I'm going to go into these into these questions. Okay, I think I'm going to devote it afterward to the OnlyFans phenomenon, and I'm going to ask: is self-made pornography the way to salvation? Because that's now how it's presented. It's self-made pornography as a healthy way to, you know, express yourself, overcome shame. You know, and I'm wondering if that's a good word. Okay, thank you for listening. That was a little overview of all my essays, and I hope you will read them. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.